Welcome to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is Ray Herbeck Jr. And Ray and I have known each other now for 4 years, probably, close to 5.
Yeah, 4 going on 5, but our background probably goes back 40, 50 years.
I think so, yeah.
Coming from the same area.
That's right. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Thank you.
Well, Ray, you and I have been very dedicated to local history and heritage and culture. We first met as volunteers at the Western Heritage Center, a wonderful foundation and visitor center, museum, in downtown Prescott on Montezuma. It's become a center gathering point for people who, as they come to the plaza and they're interested in learning about Prescott, they walk in there, and the great docents, as you walk in, they introduce you to local history, and then they point out the different museums and nonprofits that have their exhibits in the center. That is places that visitors to Prescott can go and visit. It's kitty corner from the Chamber of Commerce, where people can take tours. And as you and I have witnessed the last few years, the Western Heritage Center has a lot of educational programs for school children, just like here at Charlotte Hall Museum. They are a place of entertainment and lectures, and it's been a great little hot spot for people to get an introduction to local history. And you and Ruth have been core volunteers down there.
Since they opened, 6 years.
Yeah, since they opened. And Ray, how did your trail come to Prescott, Arizona?
Well, California I'm a native, as are you.
That's right.
It had changed. I had retired from the movie business, and I just wanted to occupy myself with writing historical novels and so forth and so on. And we had come up here to vacation 4 years in a row, and staying at the old St. Michael every time, but we'd managed to do it each season.
Was it still pink? A little pink on the outside when you first started staying there?
No. But we love the seasonal change here. You know, Southern California, meteorologically can be very boring.
Right, for sure.
Up here, it's always changing. It's a lot more fun. And I love the history of the place.
Right.
And Ruth liked the idea, because she's from Michigan, that there wasn't heavy snow, but we liked the idea of a little snow now and then.
Yeah.
So we fell in love with the place. Plus, my folks had retired in Phoenix. My dad was a big band leader, and my mom was the canary, the singer. And they retired there, but when it got hot in Phoenix, they would come up here. And I remember them telling me they loved this place. So we thought we'd come up here for vacation, and lo and behold, we fell in love with it. Sold the house, moved here.
Well, that's, and you and I do share a lot of history there in Southern California, and both having fathers in the entertainment business. And I think when you and I first met, probably 2021, we were volunteering down at the Western Heritage Center before I got involved with Charlotte Hall Museum, and I was the editor at True West Magazine. We started comparing notes. And did you grow up in the Valley before your family settled in Long Beach, right?
Yeah, Seal Beach.
Seal Beach, right?
Yeah, it was near the corner of Riverside Drive and Lancashire. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Right near the studio.
That's right.
Right near the studio. And I went to, 1st through 7th grade, I went to St. Charles Borromeo Catholic High School.
Yeah.
I was an altar boy there through the 7th grade. I was a very tall altar boy.
It was known as Bob Hope's Parish.
Yes, in fact, Kelly Hope, his son, was in my class.
How about that? Yeah, then you were right over there near Toluca Lake and downtown North Hollywood along Lancashire and Bob's Big Boy.
We would go there at least once a month. I loved that place.
Yeah, that was a big night out for my family. Parents would take us. We're going to Bob's, and we got in the car pretty quickly. We knew we were going over to Bob's Big Boy.
It was great.
And I think both of us, of course, share a love of the entertainment business and film. And let's tell people a little bit about your dad and your mom, who were both in the entertainment business. And, growing up in Los Angeles, going to school, you really never knew what your friends' parents did. It was just, many of them were part of the show business in Los Angeles. So film, television, music, what was it that your father and mother were involved with?
Music. I grew up in a house full of music all the time. My dad had a big band during the famed big band era from 1935 through 1956.
Okay.
And my mom joined that band in 1943. I came along in 46.
Uh-huh.
He had 150 sides, as they used to call them, a song on each side of a glass record back in the day, 78 RPM. He had 150 with RCA and Columbia and Vocalion.
That's big time.
Big time. He had coast-to-coast radio broadcasts. In fact, he was broadcasting coast-to-coast from the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles on VJ Day.
How about that?
And
wow.
I have a recording of that. And he had people in the audience, sailors, soldiers, Marines. Ozzie and Harriet Nelson were in the audience. He brought them up on stage, and they were all talking. They all knew each other because Ozzie Harriet was in the big band business back then also.
That's right.
And Harriet was a singer, as was my mom. So members of his band were always coming over to
What was your mother's name?
Lorraine Benson was her stage name.
All right.
They were always coming over, just jamming sessions, all the time. My mom played pretty good piano as well as sing. And I always grew up hearing music in the house and talking with musicians. It was great.
That's remarkable.
I traveled with them a lot. I grew up, in fact, a lot of, because I got into writing, as you know, I grew up with a pretty good idea of telling stories and writing even. I think I wrote my first thing when I was about 10 because I used to travel a lot with my dad's band. And my folks would get off work at 1, 2 in the morning and sleep until like noon. I was pretty much on my own in hotel rooms, entertaining myself.
Yeah.
So I had a vivid imagination that I worked on.
Right. That is fascinating. And so you saw a lot of America as a young boy.
All over the place.
Right. Do you have memories of coming up here on the centennial of Route 66?
No, but I did drive Route 66 a lot with my folks, and then later on myself.
Uh-huh. That sounds, what a childhood. And so you're living there in the San Fernando Valley, growing up, and you're going to St. Charles. And, I went to Walter Reed, which is right down the street from there, in Burbank Elementary. But then I went to Notre Dame High School.
All my friends went to Notre Dame High School because I had moved 7th grade down to Seal Beach, and I went 8th grade in Long Beach. But all my friends, everybody I knew in North Hollywood went to Notre Dame.
Right. And you ended up at St. Anthony.
Yes, St. Anthony Boys High School in Long Beach. And we had boys and girls. We shared a playground, but they had the nuns, we had the brothers.
Right. And we discovered in drilling down a little bit that you had Brother Thomas Fry for geometry, just as I did at Notre Dame High School.
That's amazing.
And Brother Thomas was one of the saintliest teachers I ever had. He lived his faith. He taught his faith. He was an incredible math teacher, very patient. But I just thought that's remarkable. In this giant city of Los Angeles, two people share a childhood of growing up in the Valley, North Hollywood, California, and then this shared experience of boys' schools in Los Angeles. And Notre Dame and St. Anthony they played each other in our sports leagues.
They did.
So, and the bus trips were never short in either direction.
No. And that was back when there was very little traffic on the 405.
Right, exactly. So, Ray, you did you think you were ever going to go into music? Being with two parents who were so musical, did they ask you or say, your son, you should learn to play piano or take singing lessons or any of that?
Well, actually, my mom got me involved with playing piano at an early age. I had my one and only solo performance in a thing at school because she had gotten me into this situation with a teacher where I learned how to play a Bela Bartok piece. Mm-hmm. But piano was just not my thing. I did all right, but I was more interested in guitar because at the time I was doing that, people like Buddy Holly and others were coming on the radio, and I was getting into listening to that kind of music.
Oh, yeah, the big musical shift there.
And the guitar was the thing.
And the guitar was the thing. You spoke about that your father's big band career went until really
56.
56.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take a quick break here and thank our sponsors, and we're going to come back and talk about 1956 to 2026 and, this last 70 years of American history, because, when we're talking about Easy 250, we're talking about 250 years. But for most of our listeners, the last 70 years is the present and what they really remember. And so much change has happened in our country in the last 70 years. We'll be right back here on Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum.
Since 1995, Helkin & Horn Ad Agency has helped local businesses stand out and succeed. From print and radio to websites and social media, their talented team crafts your brand's message and offers a plan to get it out into the community. Want results backed by over 30 years of experience? Visit azadagency.com today. Helkin & Horn, where their slogan is Be Known.
History matters. For nearly 100 years, the Charlotte Hall Museum has preserved our community's story, and over at Findlay Toyota, they believe in that same legacy of trust and reliability. That's why we're proud they support us here at the Charlotte Hall Museum. Just as Toyota has a long history of building vehicles you can depend on, Findlay is committed to our community's future. Go see their amazing selection of new and used Toyotas. Experience a legacy of quality for yourself. Findlay Toyota on Willow Creek Road in Prescott.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. And my special guest today is Ray Herbeck Jr., and we were just talking a little bit about our shared childhoods across the Los Angeles area in the for Ray, 1950s, 1960s, mine, 1960s, 1970s, but shared teachers, shared memories of growing up in this large city, which I know your parents did the same thing mine did. And people always ask me, what was it like growing up in Los Angeles? I said, well, my folks turned a big city into a small town. And I know that, we'd introduce you to the merchants that you would go into the camera shop or the post office or the pharmacy. And I'm sure you have good memories of knowing those local people and how you learned as a young person to shake their hand and look them in the eye. It was a different time.
Yeah, about 1.5 blocks from where I lived, there was this war surplus store. You don't see many of those around anymore.
Westerns? Was that the Western surplus store?
I think it might have been.
Yeah,
it was on the corner of Lancashire and
Magnolia,
and Riverside.
Riverside, yeah, the Western surplus store. I
used to hang out there because I could go there. I had gotten around 1956. Or 55. There was this guy called Fess Parker, who came to life on the Disney show,
right,
playing Davy Crockett, and gosh, I had a coonskin cap, and it got me into thinking about history. I didn't know much about it.
How about that?
I was about 9, 10. And then I took a trip right around 56, right around 56, with my mom on a train back to Arkansas, where her father was a country doctor in a small town called Gentry, population about 606. And my dad followed later on in the car. He was doing something else at the time, and he picked us up there. But in the meantime, my grandpa, her dad, took me to a Civil War battlefield called Pea Ridge.
How about that?
And of course, I was aware that there had been a Civil War, and I was, kind of thinking more about Davy Crockett and so forth. But I was intrigued by history, and he took me to this battlefield, and it was pretty overgrown. It had just ceased being a state park and had been taken over by the National Park Service, but they hadn't officially begun taking care of it. So there were weeds everywhere, right? And it was overgrown. I was thinking, well, that's weird. But they had some markers up from the state, some memorials and stuff, and I was really intrigued. And there was this old building there that was called the Elkhorn Tavern, and that had been the center point of this big battle. So we're leaving the place, and Grandpa pulls over to this little white building off the park, and we go in. It was a small museum. And there was a lady in there by the name of Lucinda Cox, who at that time was 96 years old. And I'm just a wee, 10-year-old sort of. And she took a liking to me. Grandpa introduced me and so forth. Turns out, during the Battle of Pea Ridge, she was an infant in her mother's arms. hiding in the basement of the Elkhorn Tavern, which was her parents', and blood dripped through the floorboards of the kitchen underneath which they were hiding.
Oh, my goodness.
She told me the story.
Wow.
And I was 10, but it stuck in my brain, and I was thinking, wow. And I was hooked on the idea of Civil War history. And then she goes over, and they had lots of artifacts and memorials and things that her family had picked up over the years. She gave me a musket ball, a round 58 caliber musket ball. I still have it. And that musket ball just fired my imagination. And from that point on, I was a confirmed Civil War-aholic.
Yeah.
For years.
That's just, and did you get to go back to Arkansas regularly to see your grandfather?
Another couple times. And when I graduated from high school, I had a Jeep. I was the only guy in school in 1964 with a Jeep, believe me. And a buddy of mine and I, we threw camping gear in the back, and we cut out right after graduation and toured every Civil War battlefield we could find. And I went back to Pea Ridge on the way. And my grandpa was gone by then, but it was a big national park by then, still is. And I got to know the historian there by the name of Ranger Dave Hyde, and then the park ranger, Newt Sykes, who played guitar and sang old-time tunes. I got to know them pretty well, and here I was, 18 at that point.
Right.
And I told them the story I just told you. And they said, you were here during the change. And I said, yeah, I remember writing a letter to the park complaining about the high weeds. I was 10 at the time. And Dave Hyde broke into laughter. He said, I have that letter and I've read it.
What a small world, and what an affirmation of your interest. And so, what a summer you must have had in 1964 touring all those battlefields.
Oh, yeah. Pea Ridge, Shiloh, Atlanta, Gettysburg, went to every one we could hit on the way. And, of course, we were driving Route 66 a lot of the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Getting back east.
Yeah. So when you, after you got back, did you head to college to study history in college, or where did your trail go from there?
I went up. Well, actually, I fell in love with the idea of being a National Park Service ranger, thanks to those two guys.
Yeah, sure.
But all this time, I've been working on different historical writing things. I'd been messing with that in high school even. So I had applied to Utah State University to go up there and become a major in forestry with a minor in history. I thought, well, forestry, history, I could become a park ranger.
Right.
I went up there, and I was up there for a couple of years, fought in a forest fire, as all the students of forestry were expected to do.
And where is Utah State? What's
Logan, Utah, up in the northern part of the state. Learned how to ski a little bit, not too well, but enough. And had a good time up there. But I discovered that for all of the work to get a degree in forestry, I would start work for the Park Service as a ranger at like $7,000 a year. And I decided, I think I'm going to change my major into journalism because I was writing. So then I got into journalism. I came back down to Southern California, went to Cal State Long Beach, graduated there, and got into making a career at the beginning in entertainment industry journalism, which is how I ended up in the movie business. All right.
And tell me a little bit about the entertainment what part of journalism in Los Angeles are you?
Well, I became assistant copy editor of Billboard magazine, which is the Bible of the music business.
Yeah, and you were still a guitarist? Were you still playing guitar?
I was playing guitar all the time. And having fun with different bands and stuff, but nothing serious.
Did you take that guitar with you when you drove across country?
Yes.
How about that?
It was very popular in various camps, especially at the Grand Canyon. Anyway, I was an assistant copy editor at Billboard as well as radio, TV, film editor and reporter. So I went to go out and interview a lot of interesting people like Ringo Starr. He and I polished off half a bottle of red wine in his bungalow in the back of the Beverly Hills Hotel one day. That was nice. That? Yeah. I interviewed a lot of people. It was great, and I learned a lot about journalism and headline writing and copy editing and all the good things you have to know. And then after that, I became editor of a film production magazine called On Location, and I revamped the whole magazine from front to back. The publisher loved what I did. It became popular, and it was all about filming out of Los Angeles on location.
Which is a big deal in those days. There's no internet, so you're sharing the secrets, you're sharing the tips, you're sharing
all of that.
And if you're a location manager or producer, this is something that your team's reading, because everyone's looking for the deal, the opportunity, and the location that hasn't been used too much.
It was a trade magazine. It wasn't for the general public.
Right.
And the nice part about being the editor was I made all the assignments, so any films that came along that had to do with history, guess who went and did that one?
Right. Me. Sure.
So one of those days, I assigned myself a film being shot down in Yuma in the sand dunes, and it was called The Chisholms. It starred Robert Preston. Mm-hmm. And I showed up down there, and I was getting to know the producer by the name of Paul Freeman. He was a pretty big-time producer at the time for television. And we're talking, and sometimes it takes a half hour, maybe an hour to set up for the next shot and so forth. They had a big wagon train. It was a pretty good show, authentic. And we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that he kind of pumped me on was my hobby, and I said it was Civil War history. So we started talking Civil War history, and I told him stories and things like that. It was a good time. So I would say it was 3-4 months later, the piece that I wrote on the Chisholms, he liked it, and I get a phone call at my home from him.
How about that?
From him.
Right.
He had called the office to get my home number. And I'm saying, hey, Paul, is something wrong with the piece or whatever? And he said, no. He said, I just got hired to do this show for television. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, it's for David L. Wolper, who, as you know, was the king of miniseries, which were hot at that time. He just came off Roots.
He had produced my father's. My father was wrote I Will Fight No More Forever.
Yes.
For David Wolper.
Yes.
Along with Ted Strauss. So
there I was talking with this guy about David L. Wolper's new show called North and South, based on John Jake's epic prize-winning book, or novel, I should say. And I said, well, how can I help you? Maybe we can do a story on it or something. He says, oh, no. He said, I remember talking with you down there in the dunes, and you know a lot about Civil War history, and you're a reenactor. I said, yes. He said, I don't know anything about Civil War history. I want you to work for me. That's how I got in the movie business.
I love it. And we're going to take a quick break right there, thank our sponsors, and come back and talk about North and South and Ray Herbeck Jr.'s transition from journalism to filmmaking.
For over 45 years, Blind Brothers Arizona has been the heart of window style in Prescott. From blinds, shutters, drapes, they custom design and install with the expert precision. Tailored to you, whether for your home or office, trust the name locals rely on. Visit blindbrothersaz.com today or call 928-776-1845 for a free consultation. Blind Brothers Arizona, the original since 1979.
At Foothills Bank, they're not just about banking. They're about people, community, and building futures. Whether you're managing personal finances, growing your business, planning for retirement, or buying your dream home, their friendly team is there to guide you every step of the way. Stop by your local Foothills Bank today. It's more than just banking. It's a partnership for success. Foothills Bank is a division of Glacier Bank, member FDIC.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is my friend Ray Herbeck Jr., and we're talking about his career as a writer, as a journalist, as a filmmaker, and so many things that we have in common in growing up in Los Angeles with parents in the entertainment business. Now, each of us have found our way as public historians in our own career paths, and I find it really interesting, just the serendipitous nature of the television and film business. And it was interesting you mentioned Robert Preston, because Preston film career in Westerns was reborn here in Prescott, Arizona in 1971 on Junior Bonner, where he played Ace Bonner, the father of Steve McQueen, in that 1971 picture directed by Sam Peckinpah opposite Ida Lupino. What's interesting in that picture, you had some up-and-coming actor, Joe Don Baker. You had Ben Johnson, who just won the Academy Award for Last Picture Show. People like Don Red Berry and Dave McKechnie. And, there was a lot, Sam Peckinpah and Steve McQueen and Joe Wazan put together a great cast, an ensemble cast around Steve McQueen. But Robert Preston, from my research, had not done a Western for almost 10 years. And Ida Lupino had not been acting. She'd been directing. And so both of them kind of had a revitalization of their career in the 70s. And The Chisholms, was that a TNT? Was that a Turner production?
I don't believe it was Turner. I think it was something for ABC. Because Freeman was involved with Wolper, and Wolper was involved with ABC and Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is this the late 70s, early 1980s?
84.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that Robert Preston's career took a great rebound there in the 70s after Junior Bonner, and he was doing Westerns again and film. We know that he did that big picture with Victor Victoria with... that
was a great film.
Right. And with Julie Andrews. So you find yourself here working, you're the editor of a successful magazine. You work for Billboard, which, of course, internationally famous magazine. You and Ruth married, started a family at this point?
We got married in 1980.
All right. So, your life and your career in Los Angeles is taking off. Mm-hmm. And happened chance to have a little downtime talking to a producer down in Yuma about your interest in the Civil War that goes back to your childhood and that special trip with your mom back to see your grandfather in Arkansas. So tell me how life changes. This right turn happens for you. Do you stay with the magazine, or do you suddenly find yourself shifting into television production?
It was a tough choice because the magazine was steady income.
Right.
And I was writing, which was my passion. Right. I love writing. And it gave me time to pursue my musical affectations with different bands and so forth, just for fun, really.
Right.
I wasn't looking at it as a career or anything, but it was a good time. And then along comes this offer to work for what became almost 6 months, because it was a 10-hour miniseries.
Right.
A lot of filming.
Yeah.
And
a lot of juice in those days to get a 10-hour miniseries greenlighted.
It was huge. Well, David L. Wolper was the king of the hill.
Right.
And it would require me in town working 6 days a week. And then we would be on location for a lot of that time. And it was big money, a lot more than I was making, on a weekly basis. All of a sudden I discovered, gee, the people make a lot of money in this film business, So I talked it over with Ruth, and I said I'd be gone a lot, and she backed me 1,000% and said, don't worry, I'll take care of the family. She had a steady job, at least one of us had to at that point. And so she said, it's your break. It's a chance to get in where you want to go. Because of course I was thinking, well, if I make my way into the history side of film production, it'll help me with my history writing and my interests, and maybe I'll be able to write a screenplay and get it sold somewhere. Of course, everybody thinks like that.
Sure.
In L.A.
Right.
So I made the choice with her backing and jumped into North and South.
Amazing. What a groundbreaking change for you in your life.
It took me into a career that lasted a little over 20 years.
And how much of it was filmed in Southern California, and then how much was filmed on location?
I would say 90% of it was on location, and there was some studio work at Warner Brothers for the more intimate things that we couldn't find on location. But most of it was on location in Charleston, South Carolina, and Natchez, Mississippi. Those are the areas where we mostly filmed.
Right, communities that do have historic preservation, and that you can double down on the locations as well as the battlefields and state parks and et cetera.
We found it, and we were also in Arkansas, surprisingly. Down south, there was a place where they had a Civil War era train running at the time.
There is still I know a heritage train that runs in Bentonville, Arkansas.
This was further south than that.
Okay.
But it's since gone out of business, but it was great for our purposes at that time.
And all the reenactors on the East Coast. You're going to find all the men and women who...
That was interesting, because I had to sell them on the idea of using reenactors. That was my idea. And I went in as historian and technical advisor, which gave me carte blanche to poke my nose into everybody's business on the show.
Costume, hair.
Paul Freeman told me, he said, okay, if you find somebody doing something that's not right, don't make a big deal out of it. Just whisper in their ear. And if they don't pay attention to you, come and whisper in mine. Because you didn't want to embarrass anybody.
Sure, of course.
You know? But it worked, and we made a pretty authentic show. But I convinced them to let me wrangle in reenactors from around the country to make it, number one, more authentic, and number two, less expensive for them. They didn't have to make uniforms, rent weapons, cannon, horses, wagons, all of that.
Teamsters, everyone who knows how to do all the Teamster work.
I brought in all that stuff.
Yeah. That's just kid in the candy store.
Oh, yeah, it was great. And the fun part of it was that even though 20 more years of production came out of that for me in different film projects, that one is where I got the idea for what eventually became my first historical novel that I ended up publishing up here about 5 or 6 years ago. And it took a long time to write, but that's where I got the idea, was when we were doing a Mexican War battle called Churubusco in Mississippi. And I brought in a couple hundred reenactors who did Mexican War impressions. And as I was walking around camp one night, just checking on the lads, seeing how they were doing, what they needed, I sat down with a guy from Iowa who had brought in 7 or 8 guys to play U.S. infantry, 1846 style. And we're having a cup of coffee, and I said, yeah, we're doing Churubusco tomorrow. Are you guys up for it? And he said, oh, yeah, we're going to do the attack on the bridge. Yeah, that was the scene. And I said, yeah, we've built the bridge. We've brought in I found some Mexican War reenactors and brought them in from California. And it worked pretty well. And he said, yeah, it's just too bad we're not doing about the crazy Irish guys. And I said, what crazy Irish guys? And he told me the story of the San Patricio Battalion, who were holed up at Churubusco at a place called the San Mateo Convent. And they had been U.S. soldiers who deserted for a variety of reasons and joined the Mexican army and fought against their former comrades. That became the crux of my first historical novel, which, didn't happen for 20 more years. But it gave me the idea, and I started researching.
That's a fabulous story. I love the serendipitous nature of these opportunities that present themselves to you. And as anyone who's been in the creative business knows, that sometimes that idea has to distill and percolate, and you have to make a living while you're trying to maybe
got to pay the bills.
Got to pay the bills. Come back to that story. We're going to pay some bills right now and thank our sponsors. We'll come back and talk more about Ray's transition from filmmaking into novel writing, but I think we shouldn't overlook a little discussion about the movie Glory.
Oh, I've heard of it.
All right, we'll be right back here at Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum.
Looking for the perfect gift? Visit the Bashford House gift shop on the grounds of Charlotte Hall Museum. No admission required, just walk right up. Explore unique, locally made treasures, a wide selection of history books, and so much more. Located in the historic Bashford House, it's the perfect stop for history buffs, gift shoppers, and curious tourists alike. Visit today and take home a gift they'll cherish.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Ray, for a wonderful time of wonderful stories. Hey, now get ready for the ultimate road trip. The Route 66 Centennial is here at Charlotte Hall Museum. The ultimate journey will kick off on April 30th, 2026 on the Mother Road in Seligman and in Prescott. A brand new exhibit of Route 66 photographer Terrence Moore will debut the week of April 27th in the Charlotte Hall Museum West Gallery. Now listen next week for updates on the exhibit, but in the meantime, come celebrate 100 years of the historic Mother Road on April 18th at 1 p.m. when Mother Road historian Jim Hinckley presents on his latest Route 66 book, and plan a visit to the Charlotte Hall Museum gift shop for all your Route 66 gear, guides, and books.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. And my special guest today is Ray Herbeck Jr. He and I have been friends since 2021, both as volunteers and board members at the Western Heritage Center now, as I'm the executive director at Charlotte Hall Museum. He and I are both here kind of on the front end of helping promote history and heritage in the community of Prescott. Ray and his wife Ruth are well-known reenactors here in their community. I always love walking into an event and seeing you and Ruth dressed up, different costumes.
She makes it all.
She's an amazing
seamstress. Makes it all.
So beautiful. And you've got your gambling wheel. Was it the Wheel of Fortune?
The big wheel.
The big wheel. And I think you're going to be working on trying to you're going to do some volunteering and reenacting here at Charlotte Hall Museum.
Yes. In fact, we were here last Saturday for a Living History potluck, and we're signed up to do 3 of your Living History weekends. We're going to set up a mining camp and do it authentically. I might play a couple tunes, old-timey tunes on the guitar, too.
That's fantastic. And did you know that October 3rd, we are bringing back the Folk Music Festival? Ooh. And we might need to connect you with Tom Agostino, who is booking all the acts. We're going to have over 60 acts playing here across campus October 3rd.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, I hope to make sure I make one of those Living History weekends to hear you play and meet you and Ruth in your reenactment mining community, your mining camp. So, Ray, growing up in an entertainment family, were you involved at junior high or high school level in high school plays or a high school band? Obviously, you grew up right when rock and roll, from Chuck Berry to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Beach Boys, it's
Absolutely.
all happening prime time as you're growing up from grammar school to high school and college.
In high school, I was one of the editors of the high school newspaper. I was the editor of the high school yearbook. Mm-hmm. And in my senior year, junior and senior year actually, we had assemblies on Fridays. And I ended up being the person that booked in acts for the school assembly on Fridays. Well, I had to find the acts, right? So I
knew a little bit about that from your mom and dad.
A little bit. So I started hanging out in Orange County at a place called the Mecca, which was a big folk music club then. And I would go in there, take a girl from high school on a date, sit there and listen to the acts. And it was there that I discovered the Dillards, who were on the Andy Griffith Show.
Wow.
And I fell in love with bluegrass, and I started playing bluegrass music. And then I would find other acts that I would book in for a reasonable fee. Sometimes they do it for free at our assemblies. Well, then one year we had for an assembly a talent contest among we students. And so I formed a bluegrass group. We called ourselves the Ridge Runners. Great name, right?
That is a great name.
Yeah. So I had 2 banjos and 2 guitars, 4 of us. I sang lead. I played, since I had a Martin D28, which was a pretty powerful instrument. I still have it. That was my first public performance.
Man,
in a group in front of all of my high school buddies.
In the gym?
In the gym,
St.
of course.
Anthony's High School?
St. Anthony High School, yeah.
I love it.
It was a lot of fun. I had gotten the guitar shortly before that because I had been learning how to play bluegrass down at a place in Long Beach called McCabe's Guitar Store. It was
Heard
on
about
Anaheim
that.
Street. And the guys in there, my guitar teacher was this guy who was a year older than me by the name of John McEwen.
I was just going to mention his name because he and there's another well-known name that's floating around that part of L.A. and Orange County who became pretty famous guitar and banjo players.
He ended up being one of the founding members of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
That's right.
In fact, they formed at McCabe's in Long Beach, and I was hanging out there. So he was my guitar teacher, teaching me all this stuff. And at the time, I had a what they call a gut string guitar, classical guitar, and you can't play bluegrass on that. You got to have steel strings. Mm-hmm. So he was saying, "Look, let me pick one up for you." So he walks up to the wall and he picks off a Martin D28 and says, "This is what you want," and that's the guitar I still play.
Oh my God! I met John McEwen once, and I shook his hand. He goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't squeeze too hard. That's my
right.
living right there."
That's John,
and that's my living right there, Stuart. And of course, he told me the story about him and Steve Martin working out at the magic shop.
Yes, at Disneyland.
And the two of them trading licks and becoming good friends.
John and I are still in touch.
Well,
it turned out years later when I was in the movie business, I was one of the producers of a Warner Brothers documentary series called The Wild West. Mm-hmm. Notice on the back of this shirt.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, they were asking, well, what are we going to do about music? And I said, I know a guy. And I called up John. I said, you want to get into musical scoring? It's all period music. That's what we want, and you know it. And he said, I've always wanted to score something. So I got him hired, and he did the score, and it turned out great. We even put out a CD on it.
My goodness, well, who's better than John McEwen? I just did read in the paper, the proverbial, I guess, electronic paper, but I just read that the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band has announced their final performance.
And he left them a couple of years ago to go on his own.
Right.
But they kept going on forever. But it was 5 friends out of McCabe's Guitar Store that started it.
Well, when they released the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band double album, Circle Will Be Unbroken.
Classic.
When I met John, it was my father's album. I had it in hand and had him sign it.
Oh, that's great.
And that album was featured a lot in our household. We listened to it a great deal. Tying all those pieces of culture together and growing up in Los Angeles, I will say there's a fortunate nature of growing up there where the music, film, television, the locations, just the kind of the artistry of the community, whether you know it or not, your fellow students in the classroom, at college, and then parents who support your interests in the liberal arts, and your interests in history, your mom recognizing that, taking you back, realizing some of the family heritage and history. As a filmmaker, you had a moment after North and South to be involved in what many people see as a groundbreaking movie in modern film history, and I say modern film history since 1970. Let's just put it in those terms. Since 1970, so many things have happened in terms of our culture, our popular culture in film and television. And of course, television and streaming has changed everything. But both influenced each other at the studios and green lighting. You got involved with a project called Glory. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It's I think that one of the two most wonderful projects that I did, of which I am the most proud. The other one was Alamo: The Price of Freedom, in IMAX. Mm-hmm. But it's funny how phone calls trigger so many things in that business. Like I said, North and South, I got a phone call. Alamo: The Price of Freedom. In 1985, I got a phone call to get me into that because a producer of a show that I'd finished called Gone to Texas, which had Sam Elliott playing Sam Houston, had liked the look of the 200 Texas reenactors I pulled together to tell his story and all that in the Alamo and everything. And this guy named George McAllister had written a book. called Alamo, The Price of Freedom, and he managed to get the money to pull together to do an IMAX film directed by Keith Merrill, who was a great IMAX director. But he felt that they didn't have enough money, so he thought maybe I could pull in some reenactors and save him some money. Well, I did more than that. I got reenactors involved in every level of production except camera, lights, and sound. Because by then I'd had 30 hours of production behind me, North and South 1, North and South 2, gone to Texas. This was the 4th project. And I pulled everybody in on that, and we made what a lot of people think is the most historically accurate Alamo film ever. Because for one thing, I talked him into shooting the battle at night, which is when it happened. Nobody had done that before.
Right.
But that led to, a couple years later, a phone call, again, at home. I pick up the phone, and there's this sweet female voice on the other end saying, "Is this Ray Herbeck?" "Yes, it is." "Are you in for Freddie Fields?" And I was immediately thinking that's the weirdest greeting I'd ever heard in my life.
Right.
And I'm thinking, what does that mean? And I said, and I knew who Freddie Fields was. He used to run MGM.
Right.
So I'm thinking, why would he be calling me? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm in.
Right.
Must be a Hollywood thing, right?
Was that PK who was calling you?
Yes. You knew her.
Oh, yeah, I know PK very well.
Okay. So.
Freddie Fields' daughter.
Yes.
Who went to the Orem School.
Oh, okay. She was also working on the film.
Right.
So I say, yes, I'm in. So then Freddie gets on. Wonderful guy. And it turns out his brother had been a trumpet player in the big band era, Shep Fields, and had his own band. So we talked about that for a few minutes. And I said, what is it I can do for you, Freddie? And he says, I've got this film. I've been working on it for years, and it's finally going to happen. And I know about you. I've heard and seen what you've done. And I have one question for you. I said, what's that? And he said, do you know who Robert Shaw was? And I said, oh, Colonel Robert Shaw. He was the head of the 54th Massachusetts, first black infantry regiment that fought in the war in combat out of Massachusetts. And he said, you're my boy. That was his favorite saying. And I was hired as associate producer, historian, and tech advisor on Glory, which consumed the next 2 years of my life.
I bet it did. Well, and it shows in the final production. Anyone who watches that film will walk away knowing how much time and passion went into every scene and every actor, every reenactor's costumes, the detail. It was, for anyone who saw it when it first broke, it was a groundbreaking film in Hollywood film history.
The hardest thing for me when I was going into it was, okay, I can bring in, at that point, I could make, a dozen phone calls and come up with 1,500 reenactors from around the country. I had built myself a whole little network. And, I had a dozen people that I could count on to help in production, wardrobe, props, so forth and so on. But I had never come across, in my years of reenacting, a black reenactor. So I put out the word, hey, I got to create a black regiment. And it was like, oh, really? So I called all the guys that I knew across the country, and I said, who do you know? And finally I found out, this was around 1988. And I knew in the reenactor world, we were all looking forward to the 125th anniversary reenactment of Gettysburg that year. And then I found out, hey, there's going to be 7 black reenactors there. And I said, black reenactors? And he said, yeah, they weren't at the real battle, but we don't care. It's good to have them. You know? So I talked with Freddie, and I said, look, can you send crews back to this reenactment? I can get you in touch with the people. We make a donation. We get stock footage of huge battle scenes that might come in handy. But the main thing is I want to talk with these 7 black reenactors and tell them about this project and see where we go from there. And
I love that.
So he sent me back with the director, Ed Zwick, and 2 camera crews. We shot it, and I got these 7 guys on board, and they gave me some great ideas and more people to follow up. And I ended up recruiting and raising overall about 200 black reenactors around the country.
What a remarkable part of the story. Now, we are going to talk about here before we break on your writing, but I'm going to suggest, Ray, your story matters. It's something I like to say when I stand up in front of groups and talk about people writing their story. You need to write your story of the making of glory. I think that book needs to be written and needs to be shared.
Would I have to share the profits with you?
No, it's 100% yours. I'm going to be encouraging you to do that. It's your project, it's your book, but I would love to read it, and I think there's people all over the country who would enjoy it as well.
It was a fascinating story, because it wasn't just, I shouldn't say just, but it wasn't merely the making of the film, but it was how we managed to get to the point where we could make the film.
Right. Well, that's, everyone has been in that business, including myself. The pre-production is where that's where the rubber meets the road.
In that regard, and I didn't know this at the time, when we went back there and filmed all this stuff, I thought it was going to be stock footage. My purpose was to talk with the black reenactors and get them on board and see where we could go with it.
You were the second unit. You didn't know it.
Didn't know it. And then we get back in town, and this genius, Ed Zwick, the director, little did I know that Freddie was having trouble with Columbia TriStar to get the green light, as they say, meaning we're going to start writing the checks.
Yeah.
Right? And it turns out that Ed put together, I think it was about 8 minutes of a piece showing Union and Confederate reenactors gathering, going at each other, fighting, and he put it all to Wagner music.
How about that? He knew how to sell it.
And we went to a screening room at Columbia TriStar, which now is Sony, and all the suits, as we called them, the people that write the checks, were there, and they watched this. And this particular 8-minute Wagnerian piece convinced them to greenlight the project, because then they believed in reenactors.
Well, again, I will say, this is your Spartacus moment. I think people need to read the real story, the making of the movie Glory, and I'll be the first in line to buy it, Ray.
Thanks.
I hope you pursue that. Before we close out our episode today, let's talk a little bit about your writing. Your first novel, you wrote 2 novels on the San Patricio Battalion.
The Mexican War.
The Mexican War. I know you have presented on the history of Mexican War, have some uniforms and some materials that have been original, as well as your own reenactment uniforms. Are you working on a third novel, or where's your novel writing going, Ray?
I just finished writing, finally, I got around to writing on the Civil War. I wrote a novel about the first 6 months of the Civil War. It's called Ironclad Crinolines, and it's written from the point of view of 2 women, one north, one south, who travel parallel roads at the beginning of the war, and eventually they come to an unexpected crossroads, shall we say, in Richmond. And it's based on 2 diaries that I have.
Well, it
2
sounds,
actual women.
It sounds fascinating, Ray. And tell us a little bit about if someone here in Prescott is you're going to be here 3 Saturdays this spring and summer. You and Ruth doing reenactments at our reenactments, second Saturdays of the month. You're with your mining camp. But you also volunteer regularly at the Western Heritage Center.
Every Wednesday morning from 10 or 10:30, depending on the time of year, till around 1 or 1:30.
All right.
I'll be there.
And people can find more information about Prescott Western Heritage Center online, and as well as Charlotte Hall Museum at charlottehallmuseum.org. We appreciate your service to Prescott and our community, Ray.
Well, thank you.
Your impact on our film history, community, and through your passion, bringing histories to generations of young people who may have been inspired to follow in a career just like you did by one spark of time.
That's all it takes.
I love it. Ray, I look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you
so much. All right. Thanks for listening to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum. And we're going to have Ray back on here real soon. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.